did ancient Rome put coin currency into use since it had no central bank? This is from Armstrong Economics. I recently found this wonderful blog having a tremendous amount of topics. I'll leave a link below for you for this. Here we have a statue of Juno, and on the right we have back and front images of coins, Juno Moneta Reserve, during the reign of Caesar Maximinus, 284 to 305 AD. As we know, he was one of the emperors that had persecuted Christians. Now the question was, how did the ancient Roman Empire put money into circulation since it had no central bank? Now I know that at one point the military used to be paid in salt. Sal. Sal is salt in Latin, and alas, sal, alas in Greek. Salary means, it comes from the word salt. We remember that our Lord Jesus Christ says, "You are the salt of the earth." It was even more valuable than gold, and they were being paid in salt, and they would exchange salt, which was more valuable than gold. They could do a lot of things with salt. They could preserve their food. They could season their food. But basically it was the preservation of food. Now in this case, around this time, this era, of course, they couldn't be always carrying bags of salt with them. They minted coins. So the question was, how were ancient coins then placed into circulation as currency? And Dr. JB answers, it's actually an interesting question. Legend goes that the French attempted to invade the city of Rome, and they wanted to do this by surprise. They wanted to be very quiet about it, but they frightened a sacred flock of geese. The geese made a lot of noise, and this of course alerted the Romans to the surprise attack, and thus giving the word monera, meaning Latin to warn. The Temple of Juno, after that, became popularly known as the Temple of Juno Moneta, from monera, and since this is where the coins were minted, that's how we come to use the word money, from monera, springing from the origin of the legend that and that place that was used to mint the ancient currency. We always knew that geese were the best type of guard animal because of their tremendous cackling noise. Now, in terms of the capital flow, derived from the Latin word currere, meaning to run, as where the money flowed from, giving the word currency, meaning the flow of money as currency. And that's why Juno Moneta is pictured on Roman coins holding balance scales in one hand and the cornucopia of plenty on the other. And that's how the term money and currency came into being. And he goes on to explain that since Rome had no national debt and no central bank, we wonder, how did this work? The government owned the mines that coined the money, and to meet their expenses, they coined as much as they needed. Unlike modern governments, they did not have huge welfare state. They did subsidize food, but the coins were used to pay the troops and government expenses, and that's how the money was circulated. They would increase the coin output in times of war, decrease it in times of peace, and that's how it went. Now, as far as the word salary, Roman soldiers were partially paid in salt, and it's said to be from this that we get the word soldier, saldara, meaning to give salt. From the same source, we get the word salary, salarium. Salt was a vital commodity to the Roman army, and this demand will have been met by establishing military salt works. So, did Roman soldiers actually get paid in salt? And we ask historians. Roman soldiers got paid in salt, hence the word salary. Is it true? If so, were they paid in actual bags of salt? Or was that just used as a sort of gold standard to determine rates across the empire? Lastly, if salt was so valuable, wouldn't you just be better off going to live on a beach somewhere, boiling seawater for a living? Now, in the late Republican imperial period of Rome, no, they were paid in specie. This was an etymology that Romans themselves suggested, and Pliny suggests that the word salarium, that is salary, came from salarius, salt, and said this was because in the old days soldiers were paid in salt. But he, writing in the middle of the 1st century, was referring to a non-specific and hazily remembered distant past. According to Online Etymology Dictionary, it checks out. Compensation payment, whether periodical for regular service or for a specific service, from Anglo-French salary, Old French salary, from Latin salarium, salary or stipend, originally soldier allowance for the purchase of salt. Noun use of neuter of adjective salarius pertaining to salt, from salt or salts. Amazing. That's amazing. But when was this transition made from payment in salt to payment in coins? Well, according to William Smith, article by Robert Whiston, Trinity College, Cambridge, concerning a stipend, a person or pay from stipem and pendo, stipendium, because before silver was coined at Rome, the copper money in use was paid by weight and not by tale, and according to Livy, the practice of giving pay to the Roman soldiers, ut stipendium miles de publico acciperet, was not introduced until 405 BC. On the occasion of taking of Tarracina or Anxur, he represents the change as spontaneous and unsolicited act of the Senate, but from another passage we learn that in the year 421 BC, the tribunes had proposed that the occupiers of the public land should pay their vitigil regularly and that it should be devoted to the payment of the troops. The concession was probably accelerated by the prospect of the last war with Veii, made with a view of conciliating the plebs, who without some such favor would in their then humor have refused to vote for the war. Levy represents the funds for the payment to have been raised by a tributum or general tax. The vectigil or tithe due from the occupiers of the public land was to provide pay for the soldiers, and if this was not sufficient, it was to be made good by tax or tribute levied upon the whole of the people. This tithe, however, was probably paid very irregularly, and hence the pay of the soldiers would in point, in fact, be provided chiefly out of the tributum, and a few years after the concession, that's about 403 BC, during the hostilities against Veii, a certain amount of pay was assigned to the knight also. The knight and the page. Livy, however, seems to have been speaking of the citizens who possessed an equestrian fortune but had no horse assigned to them by the state, and for it had always been customary for the knights of the 18th centuries to receive pay out of the common treasury in the shape of an allowance for the purchase of a horse and a yearly pension of 2,000 asses for its keep. Wow. Hence, Niebuhr doubts the accuracy of the account which is given by Livy, observed that the Viennentine War cannot have been the occasion which the practice of giving pay to the troops was first established. The aerari must undoubtedly have always continued to pay pensions capita to the infantry in the same way as single women and minors did to the knights, and the change consisted in this, that every legionary now became entitled to pay, whereas the number of pensioners had previously been limited by that of the persons liable to the charging with them, and the deficiency was supplied out of the aerarium from the produce of vectigal, and when they failed, by a tribute levied even from those plebeians who were themselves bound to serve. So, okay, we know that basically this is a very historical thing. Basically around 400 BC is when definitely they turned to coins. It says here, the sum that was considered as a unit called stipendium, being paid 3 times a year. Hence, Suetonius says of Domitian, an emperor, instead of 75 drachma or denarii, Domitian gave the soldier 100. He made an addition of 25 denarii or 1 aureus to their pay. The expression of Suetonius supposed that 3 aurei were paid every quarter instead of every 4 months. That's every 3 months instead of every 4 months. After the addition made by Domitian, that of Sonarius implies 4 aurei instead of 3 were paid. So they got an increase. How happy for them. So, all right, we see that about 400 BC, they were being paid in coins, it seems. So I'll leave a link below for you for these. This is very interesting. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.